Up next, a movie that tries to make Little Nash Rambler a creepy song. Hello and welcome to RotD Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2018 movie Malevolent. This is something I've seen in my queue for a little while now, and for some reason I just kind of hesitated on pulling the trigger. Something about the poster art, it wasn't off-putting, it just didn't intrigue me a whole lot. But I figured it was time to get around to it. It was a fairly recent release, and it's time to weigh in on it. And what I found was a movie that started very strong in terms of potential scares, in terms of characters, in terms of storyline, in terms of backstory, and ultimately it just didn't know what to do with any of it until it kind of turned into a bit of a directionless mess. But to get into more detail, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot of this one surrounds our main character of Angela, who, along with her brother's main squeeze, and a fellow student, have a bit of a scam going. They will find people that believe that they're being haunted and provide exorcism services, where they will encourage the haunting entities to move on. In reality, this movie is set in the 80s, so they bring some fancy new 80s video technology equipment into the house, and the rest of the crew kind of stays back and watches over monitors with the client. And Angela will then go, and while she's being filmed, she will go out and go into the haunted rooms and so on and so forth and talk to the spirits and get them to move on. It's all just a big scam. However, certain elements start popping up that would indicate that perhaps Angela can see more than she is letting on, or that she even realizes herself. It kind of gets into some more of the backstory of this, where the inspiration for them to develop this was from Angela's mother, who was purportedly, and they never believed her, seeing ghosts and so forth. So they thought, well, why don't we, and pretend like she pretended, and perhaps she wasn't. And then they finally get a call from a house that the old woman that is living there, she is tired of hearing the girls screaming, and she wants to put a stop to it, so they get reluctantly hired on, and the movie really just takes off from there. That's really where the rubber meets the road on this one. Again, I really thought this started strong. I like the Angela character, I like the premise, I like the setup, and it even had a really, really decent scare at the beginning that wasn't necessarily a jump scare. It was just very good and creepy. The way that they did it, I thought, was quality. So altogether, a great layup, and I was expecting the movie to really continue down that path from there, but ultimately I gave the plot a 10 out of 25 because they had, with this great layup and these great characters and this great start, everything just kind of fell apart about it. The characters wound up having no real arcs to them. They just kind of tumbled down the rabbit hole, pretty directionless. The plot twists that were taken with the house were odd and just didn't make a whole lot of logical sense to it. The progression of the haunting was almost pointless. And moreover, the scares simply weren't there outside of that first portion of the scene there. So it was just a darn shame. 10 out of 25. I really can't give the plot more than that, and that 10 points is largely due to how well it set things up. The intent, I gave a 9 out of 25. And again, for a lot of the reasons that I already mentioned, for a movie that started so strong, and the first few scenes, I think, trying to come up with an intention of the movie, the first few scenes are always a good indicator of it. Is it going to be silly? Is it going to be scary? Is it going to be character driven? Is it going to be plot driven? Is it going to be, what is it going to be? The first few scenes usually say that. And the movie did not live up to the promise that it was given by the quality, the admitted quality of the first few scenes. So What its intention was, it seems like it's intending to be a good, really strong, scary movie that has some very strong, character revelations and character arcs and so forth. And ultimately, it just wasn't. So 9 out of 25. The acting, I actually gave a 16 out of 25. This was somewhat impressive in some areas, somewhat mediocre in others. But I think the standout was our lead, played by Florence Pugh as Angela. She actually did a pretty phenomenal job. I wish that she had been given more of an arc. I wish that she had been given more to work with in terms of where to take her character and the journey, internal journey of where she was going to go. The technical, I gave a 16 out of 25. The technical aspects of this were actually fairly adept. The camera work was good. The color palette was good. The editing was good. Aside from the scares, because it did attempt more scares, but they ultimately just kind of landed flat. And when it comes to jump scares, that's mostly done in the editing room, so I have to kind of fault that on that. Sound design and so forth. The editing just didn't come together in a way that the beats allowed for jump scares to work. They, as I mentioned in the intro, they tried to take Little Nash Rambler, classic song. They tried to make it into a menacing one, or ominous one, in the same way that Jeepers Creepers was in Jeepers Creepers. I think that it worked a lot better in Jeepers Creepers. As it was, I was just enjoying hearing Little Nash Rambler as opposed to being scared by it. It was an interesting concept, and I don't fault anybody for trying things. It didn't really work in the context of what they were doing here. But I thought the effects were fairly adept, and the technical deserves every point of those 16 that I gave it. So that gives us a total of 51 out of 100 points. This is not a movie that I would recommend to people. It is also not one that I would talk people out of if they were wanting to watch it. Tip of my hat, off you go, no problem. It's definitely not a bad movie. I just feel like it's nothing that I would purposefully go to somebody and say, hey, you got to watch this. And it's a shame because the way that the beginning really set this up, it looked like it was heading in that direction, and it just never really got there. It just kind of stumbled down the hill as opposed to confidently strode down it. So that should about do it. That's my review for Malevolent. I thank you for joining me today. It really does mean a lot to me. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.